This amendment ensures that none of the funds appropriated in this act will be used to administer the Paris Climate Accord. The Paris Climate Accord is the unilateral surrender of the American economy, not for the sake of any sort of environmental improvement. It merely uses the veneer of climate change to execute a permission structure for some of the dirtiest countries in the world, for some of the greatest polluters, to be able to benefit at the expense of the United States. The Paris Climate Accord represents a circumstance where we were dead money at the table, putting up cash in exchange for economic development in faraway lands that would not benefit our people. This was a globalist enterprise. It was America last, and U.S. taxpayers should not be funding the Paris Climate Accord. That's the amendment, and I reserve.
The gentleman reserves. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from California seek recognition?
I rise in strong opposition to this amendment.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, it is very clear from the science that the most existential crisis the world faces is from the growing climate crisis. Without intervention, our warming planet will have irreversible negative impacts on the United States and throughout the world. Climate change has resulted in lives upended in Texas and Florida, has led to extreme flooding in California and Vermont and throughout the country. And climate is not an issue that can be addressed by countries on their own. Air, water, pollution, they do not respect boundaries or sovereignty. The Paris Agreement, in recognition of this, brought all countries together around joint goals achieved by individual country plans. As proposed, this amendment would significantly damage the efforts of the United States to support developing countries as they pursue efforts to implement their commitments under the Paris Agreement. In addition, a wide range of U.S. climate and development programs would be impacted by this amendment, and it would seriously impede our ability to implement our obligations under the Paris Agreement. It would also prohibit the Department of State from participating in critical international climate negotiations. The climate crisis poses threats to the stability of countries, heightens social and political tensions, and adversely affects food prices and availability. And this is according to our own military. The need for foreign assistance will only increase if we do not address this significant driver of crises around the world. I urge my colleagues to oppose this amendment. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlewoman reserves. Gentleman from Florida is recognized.
I'd yield such time as you may consume to Chairman Diaz-Balart.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you. I want to thank the gentleman from Florida because he raised some, I think, very important issues regarding the Paris Agreement. Look, even if it were true that global emissions will result in this global apocalypse in the distant future, the truth is that most developing countries are irrelevant in any climate model used to speculate about temperatures 100 years down the road. These countries have emissions that are nearly frankly undetectable when compared to the real culprits, which are China and other countries in Asia, which, by the way, are exempt, by the most part, from this climate accord. So while our bill already prohibits funds for the Green Climate Fund, the Clean Technology Fund, and other vehicles that could be used to carry out this Paris Agreement, I agree, and I thank the gentleman, that we should ensure that no parts of this wasteful spending, this really virtue signaling, is allowed to continue. So I thank the gentleman, and I strongly support his amendment. I yield back. Thank you, sir.
Gentleman reserves. Gentlewoman from California is recognized.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, many of our developing country allies have made it very clear that strengthening their ability to address climate change and the threat that it poses is an overriding national priority, and they are looking to the United States for support. I was in COP27 in Egypt a couple of years ago, and this is exactly the message that was sent. The FY24 House SFOPS bill willfully ignores the changing climate and its implications for so many other global challenges this bill is intended to address, including promoting food and water security, global health, the protection of tropical forests, and other vital natural resources, and social and political stability in strategically important regions. According to the World Bank, climate change could pull 132 million people back into extreme poverty by 2030 and could drive the internal migration of an additional 216 people by 2050. Every one of our districts have been challenged by severe drought, rainfall storms, and heat. We are continuing to spend more and more on humanitarian needs caused by these disasters, both domestically and abroad. We need to get ahead of these crises. Helping communities cope, especially those with the least means to do so, is both moral and smart. Why are we demonizing these programs and cutting ourselves off from valuable tools? These are not problems anyone can solve alone. We must work with others, which make cooperation and our multilateral tools work. That's what we need, such as the Clean Technology Fund, the Green Climate Fund, the Global Environmental Facility. All of these and more are so important. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlewoman reserves. Gentleman from Florida is recognized.
It is neither moral nor smart to drive our nation deeper into debt, to jeopardize the future of this country so that we can engage in a globalist virtue signal. If this global agreement were real and benefiting our country, I think you'd find more people that were open-minded about a desire to ensure that we have an environment that is good for all of the inhabitants of the planet Earth. But unfortunately, that's not what the Paris Accord did. The Paris Accord required the United States to put up the cash, and then it gave the exemptions to China and India and the worst polluters on the planet Earth. So this isn't a question about whether or not we support the environment. This is a question about whether or not, under the veneer of environmentalism, we are going to kill American jobs, kill American manufacturing, make our country less competitive, drive down our GDP, while China and India play us like fools. We are better than that. The underlying bill does great work to ensure that our resources are directed to America's interests, not to these interests of these global institutions. I would encourage adoption of the amendment, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman Rios back. Gentlewoman from California is recognized.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, just one point I'd like to mention with regard to the climate emergency, which it is. You know, our young people deserve a future. They deserve a planet that is here for them. And I think we need to understand that the work we do in this House, or that we are not doing, really affects their future and their lives and their livelihoods. I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields back. The question is on